Hi, my name is Karen Jeffery, and I am here at the Sunset Theatre in Wells, BC. And this episode of Where You Live, we will be in conversation with Bill Horn and Claire Kajunzik of Amazing Space. Hi, my name is Karen Jeffery, and welcome to another episode of Where You Live. We are in Wells, BC at the Sunset Theatre with my guests, Claire Kajunzik and Bill Horn, who have been here for many years and run the Amazing Space. We're going to be talking in conversation with them about the theatre, about Wells, about art, how it all comes together, and I consider them dear friends, and it's really interesting to get to interview them in this space that we are now sitting in that's almost completely renovated, which is amazing. One of my questions that I have for both of you to begin with is, when was the first time you saw the Sunset Theatre?
We had seen the last performance that took place with Bob Bosson in 1995 in the summer. Does that sound right?
Yes, he did a small concert here, and he had a slideshow that went with his No Pasaran song about Clayoquot Sound. He actually had a 35 millimeter slide carousel, and there was a little screen rigged up, and he sang with the projections of the slides. But I think that was the very last public event that took place in here before the building was officially condemned, before you purchased it.
Those are the days when you had to bring your own pillow to sit on a seat because they were so old and worn down.
The first time I came into anything here was a Kim Robertson harp concert. And it was the first summer I came when I'd been invited to teach silkscreen printing at Isle Mountain Arts. And Kim was doing this harp program. And I walked in here, and it was magical. This was definitely a very special place.
That's really great to hear. I want to know, we can step back, and I want to know a little bit about both of you and what brought you to Wells and how you ended up in Wells, and that before you met the Sunset Theatre, of course I think of it as an entity. It was something that called me, and I love the space, but it would be great to know how you ended up here, about your Amazing Space, and then we can go from there.
Well, as I mentioned, I've been invited to teach silkscreen printing in Wells at Isle Mountain Arts. And it was a 4-day program. I'd never been to Wells. I had been to Barkerville as a child in the early 60s. All I remember was torrential rain and 30-foot long mud puddles and a very potholed road and a few exhibits, not very much in those days. But we didn't stop in Wells. So this time, I'm sure it was 93, 90, somewhere in there, came up and thought, oh, interesting town. It's a day's drive from Vancouver. I had time to go out to Barkerville and also to Bowen Lake. Paddled a bit on Bowen Lake with a friend that I'd driven here with. Then I was invited back the next summer, and Claire came that time. And this was during a period when we'd been looking to find a place that we could buy for ourselves. We had been renting a wonderful old wooden house in the downtown east side of Vancouver, but that neighborhood was getting pretty intense. And we couldn't afford to buy that house from the owners because it was so expensive even back then. So we looked around in different communities in BC, and the time that Claire came, we discovered that the old Catholic church was available for sale.
Yeah, it had been abandoned by the diocese back in the early 70s probably, because the population of the town, which had been 4,500 some people, had gradually, as the mines were mined out, it was a small town when we got here, about a couple hundred, and the church had been abandoned. The neighbors had bought it from the diocese in Prince George, and we heard it was $30,000, and we were thrilled. We kind of said, let's take a look, and the neighbors who owned it said, just break in. They said, pull off some boards off the windows on the ground floor. And we have a photo of Bill's bum going through and us taking photos of him getting in. But we had to, it was like buying almost like an abandoned barn. We had to put in water and sewage and lighting and insulation, and then we actually took off the back wall and made a place to live. So it went from a couple thousand square feet to 3,700 square feet.
So the main space of the Amazing Space, so for anybody that doesn't know or would like to take a day trip to Wells to come and see the Amazing Space, Claire and Bill have truly a gallery that is the Amazing Space. And you walk in and there's this incredible art and it's just magical and you feel like you're in a bit of another world, which is really, I always love going in there because it has that feeling of just being transported somewhere else. And if you're having a bad day or if you want a little pick-me-up or you just want to share, it's always a place that I love to come into to just for that, just it sort of restores me. So so when you bought that building, because of course I've only known the building as I see it now, was it just that space then? Was it just the main floor and the little bathroom and where you have the piano is up there and the trees are hanging?
There was no bathroom. There was no plumbing that was functioning. There was no heating system that functioned. No insulation. The front end of the building was caved in a bit, and the ceiling was starting to come down. We had a big project on our hands, and neither of us had done renovations. But I should note that we didn't just come into this by ourselves. We had a lot of support from family and friends to help suss out the building, do initial repairs and renos, and do some plans. But also, in a way, Marie Nagel was a prime force in welcoming us and in a way mentoring us and encouraging us to come. She had previously bought the old Anglican church down the street, fixed it up enough to run as a gallery for her art. And I think without Marie having been there, and Isla Mountain Arts being there, and Susan McMurray, who had the old little building that's not there anymore, it was the Pentecostal Hall. She called it the Sunshine Cottage, and that was a gift shop. It collapsed under the snow load a number of years back, but that was a little nucleus that made enough critical mass for us to think, hey, that's worth giving this a try.
Yeah, I was going to say, my thought was even the windows were broken. They were dark yellow stained glass, like the kind of chipped glass with leaded frames around them. And we had to pull out all the windows over time and replace them with clear glass and double glazed and then inside storms. So if you see the place now, people come and say, oh, you're so lucky. And we think, yep, yeah. We were lucky, but we sure worked to get this.
And it's really interesting because the Sunset Theatre, as we see it today, what I notice is that people walk in and this is how they do see it. And it's wonderful because you have this long-term vision. And when I bought the Sunset Theatre, of course, as you know, the running water was going into the field tiles on the side, and it was sinking the building. Nobody knew why the building was sinking, and slowly discovered over time that it was because the sewage was not being drained properly, and the windows are broken, and there's no insulation, and there's all of this lead and everything, and you have the vision of what you see for the building, and then now people see it, and all of the work that you've done is kind of collapsed into a little story. It's collapsed into a 15-second or 30-second interchange with somebody saying, oh yeah, we renovated the building, and they don't understand the work that has gone into it. I mean, I remember meeting you guys, and you lived in the house across the street as you chipped away at the place that you're now living in the back of the building. But even me, I see the Amazing Space as it's complete, right, as it is today.
Yeah, we rented for 8 years here until we were able to move into, we actually took the back wall off the church.
Do you want me to hold
and
that
moved
for
it
you?
out, sure, and moved and added an addition of 10.5 feet. So by taking the back wall off, we moved the space forward, and it looks the same as it did in the 30s, with a beautiful big, it's a 15-foot ceiling, and we use it for art pretty well up to the top. And we then built kitchen, living room in the back, and then bedrooms on the addition underneath there. So downstairs is the print shop, and it's got an 11-foot ceiling. It's not just a little basement, it's
right.
A beautiful space downstairs, and people have no idea. They come and they try to figure out where we live in the gallery, and I say, no, and they open
Right.
the door to the vestry, the beautiful old curved door that was looks like a ship's door.
Well, it is magical in that way too, because you go down and there's this space, and then you go down another set, and there's this space over here, and then there's your living quarters, and then there's bedrooms, and then there's the print shop, and everything. So I saw it as a gallery now 17, 18 years ago. It was a gallery, and you were working out of there. At what point did you decide to start doing your art and creating out of the amazing space?
Well, it was the second year I came to teach that 4-day silkscreen program. We ended up finding this building, and we came back several weeks later to really assess the building with a friend who'd done a lot of building. And then we started negotiating with our neighbors, Mike and Marion, and reached an agreement and bought the building. I think the sale went through around the new year. Yeah, January 1st of that year. And then we started the interesting transition period of moving our stuff out of the downtown east side, this old 3-story ramshackle wooden house, bit by bit up north. Our first summer, we lived in Marie's basement and traded free rent for cooking for her, because she was super busy, not just running her gallery, but also producing and editing the Wells Community News, a monthly paper. So she really had her hands full, and cooking was the last thing she wanted to do. I like cooking, so it was a great exchange. Then we lived for much of a year in the Wells apartments. There were a lot of moves. I think we had one move with a cube van and another friend's kind of covered pickup truck. But the rest of them were with an old Volvo station wagon beater that we would just pack with stuff. So silk screens, paints, framing supplies, all our stuff. Yes.
We had people that lived in the house that we'd rented from the downtown east side and let us move out gradually over a year.
Right.
So we were very lucky that way. But yeah, the third year we were here, we were living in the house across the street that we rented from a friend who'd moved out of Vancouver and was looking for somewhere to live. And he was actually heading up the Sunshine Coast. And I said, well, while you're here, take a look around. I said, you could probably get 2 houses here for the price of one on the Sunshine Coast. So he did buy 2 houses, and he rented one to us for 7 years.
Oh, wow.
John
Nice.
Yates.
Yeah, we owe a lot to John because he was so gracious and generous, and we might not have been able to manage the way we did without John's support in his way. But there were quite a few trips at the beginning to do some very basic stuff, similar to what you and Dave have dealt with this building. So fix that caved-in front end with a concrete steel-filled buttress, dig and install drainage around the entire building to reduce the amount of spring runoff coming in the building, go up and put on a ladder on the roof to be able to deal with the chimney and the plumbing stack. It went on from there.
Well, the first one was, didn't you and our brother-in-law Ian get a tree and put it in the basement, almost the height of that 11-foot space, and then you put little wedges in and you hammered underneath it to lift the top floor so you could fix the whole front end of the building and the cement.
That followed the caved-in end at the front. The front end of the building, this hill gradually encroaching the building was rotting the structure. So we had to support the building with these 2 little lodgepole pine trees jacked up with wedges, and we had a little 20-ton jack. Then we replaced all that rotten wood, with a pressure-treated plate and new studs and new material, and got that stabilized. So yeah, that was one of the first steps. I think by the next year, our first summer with the gallery open, it was uninsulated, it rained a lot, it was very cold.
And the art was in
we
the
thought we'd
pews.
gone to hell. And it was pretty miserable in there that first summer. Thankfully, we did have that little espresso machine, which brought a little light and warmth.
So you had the espresso machine even back then?
That was a present we bought ourselves in Vancouver to bring up here.
It's a real machine. The next summer, we hired Arnie and Fred Schmode to put in blow-in insulation in the gallery. And that started making a difference. So little by little, we made modifications and repairs and improvements to make it more livable and just look better, be more functional.
We didn't move in until 2003, 4 really, 'cause, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that big move. You know, it seems to me in talking to you that there could be a whole series on renovating buildings in Wells and what it takes, and the tenacity that you have to have, and actually the staying power in order to make these buildings are what people see now. I mean, I know that, and the appreciation to go back and to actually try to preserve some of the appreciation for the building itself and what it takes to actually see what it is around this town that is actually known for its art, hopefully, and the artists that come here. I want to kind of switch, just move things a little bit because of limited time to talk about the art that's inside the building and your passion for art and what drives you. I know that there's a lot of social change that you like to talk about through your art, or to try to get us to have some social change through your art, which I think is really inspiring. And also some of the change and some of the movements that you've helped here in the town. For example, the school and the various things that have happened.
Well, if I can say, when I came here, I didn't call myself an artist. Actually, I called myself a cultural worker.
Wow.
Because, and I just, even when you were saying that a little bit before, it's kind of like one of the things we've been activists ever since both of us have been all our adult lives, but we've done everything we've done on limited salaries that come and go. Like neither of us has a day job that sustains us. So our slow incremental moves towards finishing, like you and Dave with the Sunset, are you get a little money and you fix something, you get a little money and you fix something. But at the same time, half our careers are really based on what we care about in the world and making that, and our art reflects it. For us, it's in different ways, but I'm a feminist, I'm an activist, and my series have gone from being, when I moved from Vancouver, I was doing a whole series of women that flew, and that they were flying out of trees, or in trees, trying to get out of the trees, and I realized I was leaving Vancouver, this big tree with this big social network, and going out into the northern lights, and my work started changing here because my whole life changed. And I could tell you more about mine, but Bill.
I think a lot of our art has always reflected what we've been involved with and what's around us. So, and we both worked in all sorts of media and materials. Oh, people sometimes come in and say, well, who's that artist? And well, actually, that's Claire's as well. They didn't realize that she had done some work that's like a realistic watercolor of some people in Nicaragua where we lived in the mid-'80s for a year working there. So in a way, we're never bored because we work in different modes, different themes, and different media. Claire's more recent work deals with the changing forests and the pine beetle epidemic, and has produced a huge body of work that could itself spawn all sorts of other
around the
directions. And we've taken that to international science conferences, and I've done a little bit of that kind of work too. I've also done work that's based on my activism that it's not really selling artwork, so there's less space to show that in our gallery when we're trying to make a little bit of a living in the tourist season. So I have work that I think of as more sellable, and stuff that's a project that I pursue in the rest of my life, and here and there are venues and exhibition opportunities where I can show that, and often have little bits of it in the gallery just for people who might be interested in that.
And have been.
Yes.
And I see your T-shirt. You do a lot of T-shirts. Can you tell us about your T-shirt that you've created?
This is one of two shirts I designed and printed as fundraisers for the legal fight against the Site C Dam up in Treaty 8 territory on the Priest River. So there are two language groups up in Treaty 8. Cree, which is this one, Mamatausipi, Magical, Supernatural, or Sacred River of Wonderment, beautifully translated by Art Napoleon. And the other one says Wochigi, and it's a Daniza Beaver language shirt, again referring to the Peace River. And we've been really blessed in a way to be involved in that campaign, because we've met so many inspiring people, and they've given us a lot more, I think, than we've gotten back. But yeah, it would be, because we do some screen printing and design work, all sorts of things, we can use those tools and things in different campaigns. The school campaign you mentioned, that was a huge thing in Wells in 2002 when the school district based in Quesnel, aided and abetted by the provincial government, which had Gordon Campbell as premier and Christy Clark as Minister of Education, wanted to close our elementary school, our kindergarten to grade 7 school here. And all the letters and meetings and things came to no avail, and at a certain point, Clara started a hunger strike. 50 people joined that hunger strike, including the mayor of Wells, the mayor of Quesnel, and all sorts of folks. It was a long campaign. In the end, we saved that school as a community. We paid a big price because the district of Wells had to buy that school. That's another story.
Yeah,
However,
what people don't know, and because that's a whole other episode almost, yes. But in order to save the school, they all had to almost relinquish any kind of ties that would save the school from further erosion or upgrades or anything. And so now, 15 years later, we're in a situation where the school is in dire need of repair, and the province is saying, or not on our nickel type of thing. And so that's an interesting development, down the road, hindsight and all of those things. I mean, I think it was right to save the school because I know as a parent and somebody who struggles with living in Wells full time or not living in Wells full time, as a parent, you need a school for your children. And an hour away, both ways, every single day through the roads and the schools is an incredible sacrifice for your children.
And winter conditions.
And winter conditions. The reason why you moved to Wells in the first place is because of the solitude and because it's a small town and because of the community, and then you have to ship your kids somewhere else. So it's kind of counterintuitive to not save the school and to not have it as an example, actually, of education in rural Canada. Right. So
it was important to save the school to save our community because we
Absolutely.
felt without a school we wouldn't have a community. A lot of art and music and theater were really important parts of that campaign. Part of our intent was if it's not fun, it might not be worth doing in that campaign. We tried to avoid any personal attacks, and as a result, there was a lot of creativity. Mm-hmm. There were songs rewritten and performed, and even a CD. The students were involved in street theater. There were banners Claire did with the children. I screen printed flags. There were stickers. There was a lot of stuff, a website. And I think without that level, it might not have been possible to sustain the commitment and energy because let's remember, everybody working that campaign was working 5, 6, 7 days a week through the summer. And we needed something to feed us back, and I think that was essential.
And that's one of the things in a small community of, 250 people year round. And I know with BGM being here and stuff, the community is slowly growing more. Like the base is growing, but what people don't really understand is that we deplete our energy because there's so many things going on, and everybody. So one major event like a school takes commitment from a whole bunch of people while they're sustaining a job, while they're doing other things. And when you have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, 8 organizations in town in a small community, there's not a lot of human resources to go around. And I think that that's one of the things that we found with this place. Everybody loves the fact that we've saved the building and that we're sitting now today on this stage in this beautiful little 100-seat theater, historic theater, but it's taken 17 years and people say, well, why has it taken so long? Well, because it's taken so long because we don't have the human resources. I mean, money is one thing, but the actual time to put it together. And so we, as a community, it's like everybody's working on this thing and then that thing and then this thing and this thing and just trying to survive,
Well, the other thing is because of the harsh conditions of the weather. You have a summer to try and earn some money with some of the tourism that comes through, but that's when you're trying to fix up a building.
Right.
And you can't just go get loans out to do it because you don't know if you can pay them back if you're living in the arts.
Well, also speaking of loans or even insurance, banks, they won't even recognize for a large part I know when we were trying to get a mortgage or something to help
Right.
with the building, they wouldn't even recognize it. They don't consider it an asset because it's not something that is in the middle of a city. And how do you value it? How do you value something that you love as a person, as an artist you love? You can see what can be created inside this space. I mean, inside this space, as you both know, Jake's Gift came to life, which is close to its 1,000th performance of performing Jake's Gift that, was born from an artist, Julia Mackey, touring across the country and around the world. But banks don't look at that as an asset. So it's really hard when you have a vision for something to try to get other people to value that. And I think that's why I admire you guys so much, is because if you weren't here, I mean, you thank John Yates and Neva and, people that came along and Marie Nagel. And I thank you guys, because if you guys weren't here, I don't know. I mean, I know that we're on the brink of that possibility, but, for me, you've kept us going too, so.
It's
And
been
likewise.
it's been really heartening for us to look down the street and hear you and Dave have been beavering away at this building and doing a very similar thing against similar odds. We've had the advantage of having a full concrete slab under our building. You didn't. Different idiosyncrasies. But yeah, I've felt an enormous affinity, and just having people that we can share those struggles and victories with who understand the enormity of it, that's really, really important. There's another ingredient in this, though, that you almost touched on, and I was remembering, I spent a lot of years working with CARFAC, our National Artists Advocacy Organization for Visual Artists, and in the course of that work, around the time we moved up north here, somehow, and working to advocate for artists in the north and north central BC, I discovered that the mission statement or vision statement of the BC Arts Council essentially defined culture as originating in urban centers and was distributed to smaller places. A very paternalistic message. And then it had a little disclaimer. That doesn't mean that other things don't happen in the boonies, but in different words. And I remember challenging this in writing, and I made a collage about it to put in their faces. And it's not there anymore. They've rewritten that, thank goodness.
Yes,
but
I was going to say it.
the point is, I think all of us in the smaller places have been up against a very heavy urban bias when it comes to infrastructure funding. And let's not forget, there are hidden subsidies and tax systems that favor production in larger centers, as well as all the aesthetic bias that, well, it's only legitimate if it's in Vancouver or, well, of course, New York or Toronto. That's where the real stuff happens.
That's right.
And yet something like Jake's Gift comes out of here that is at such a level of integrity and authenticity. I mean, we've watched it 6 times, and yeah, I cry every time. It's brilliant.
Yeah. And this weekend, I mean, sorry, you were going to say something.
Well, I was going to say the other thing is, it's ironic that whenever there's a big public event, whether it's political or other kinds of social, they want the arts there.
Yes.
They want music, they want visuals, and often they're asking for it for free or for high subsidies. And you're one of the people, like, we might have given up without you, because you, from the get-go, you pay standard professional industry fees. And a lot of people are always asking for stuff and asking us to subsidize it. And we were just heartened that you started this project, and we might have left
Right.
a couple times if it hadn't been for you holding the ground here.
Well, thank you. I mean, I do value artists a great deal. I have a hard time asking for any artist to do something for free. I know I've worked at 2 major sporting events, the Olympics as well as the Canada Winter Games. And as the manager of culture in both of those organizations in the various departments, I mean, in the Olympics it was for the Athletes Village, and for the Canada Winter Games it was for the whole games. What comes out of that is that it's always a budget that's nice to have. It's if they need a budget, if they need extra money, they're going to pull it from the arts. They're going to pull it from the culture, even though there's a mandate that they have to have the culture. And it is the concert that people are coming together, that people remember. It is the medal ceremony where everybody's cheering and standing together. And it's when, I mean, I'm not to take away from the sporting event itself, because of course, I mean, you see somebody go across the finish line and I burst into tears too, and I'm cheering them. But we do have a tendency, even though we say that we value art, when it comes down to that final dollar and actually paying for it, we still have a long way to go. I haven't had the privilege of traveling the world or going to other cultures, but I know from reading and looking and seeing that culture and art is valued at a much greater rate and standard than we are chipping away at. And when we living here in rural BC, in rural Canada, some of the challenges that we face in trying to promote the arts are so far from people's consciousness. Like just getting somebody here, just getting this to happen took 17 years, to be able to have the infrastructure so a television camera can be here on the stage. Like it's not the same as in an urban center. So when you ask people to come here to create art, where there's no cell phone service, where internet costs 10 times what it costs in the city, when you're asking people to shop at one store where they have to travel 75 kilometers to get groceries, where there's one restaurant open, where they have to shovel themselves in and out, it's a lot to ask.
The irony is, for 22 years in the gallery in the summer, one of the most frequently answered questions is, how can you make a living here? How could I do it? People want to know how to live in places like this.
They do.
They're desperate to get out of the big urban centers, and it takes a lot of courage to decide you're going to jump, you're going to leap into something and you're going to figure it out as you go.
Yeah. I want to kind of touch on the possibility of you moving on from this space, because it's something that I also, after 17 years, life goes on, and when you have children and you see, and we've all lived in many, many places in our collective lifetime, what it feels like to be on the brink of the possibility of moving on to the next part of your life. And and people come along and they see it all finished and they're like, oh, I think I want that space, and what that feels like. Because we do want life to go on. I would love to know that in 100 years this place was lined up down the block and still hopping. And obviously I won't be here.
Well, I'd say it's both daunting to think of moving and exciting, and it's both sad, but but also interesting to think of moving, because we've got so settled in here. We occupy 3,700 square feet of space very well, and it's an exhibition space. And in Victoria, where we have a place we're going to move to, my family's helped buy a house, we'll have to build a studio, so we'll have to start again and find a market. And we won't have a gallery space, so it'll be very different. And our identities will shift, and I'm starting to feel that already. It's just, there's some grieving, but there's also excitement. So it's a win-win if we stay here another year or two, and it's going to be interesting when we have to leave.
Yes, there's a lot of upheaval to embrace, and it is daunting, but it'd be great to be closer to Claire's family, and in a, maybe more lively community. Like, there's a lot more resource there for us. And I think one of the harder things at times has been feeling as if we're in exile. And I don't think we have been in a way, but sometimes it can look that way, and we can sometimes be treated that way, even if it's not really, it shouldn't really be the case. I know every board and bone in that building, and we've done a lot of finishing work with reclaimed materials. So it's like your proscenium arch in this building, there are nail stains that I remember pulling those nails out. So I got a huge emotional investment just in the flooring and windows and stuff that I've done. And I never knew how to do that work before coming here. So that's been a big gift. I've had to learn how to use those tools to make windows and flooring and things. And I've been able to use some of that in my art. So I'm going to really miss that space and the enormous privilege to work in a silkscreen print shop where I'm on a wooden floor with lots of space above and around me. I can leave things out. I may not have the privilege of that space in Victoria. And we won't be in a building with the karma of this old church with arched ceilings and windows. That'll be different. I think the other thing is we've had this dual combo of constant interruption through the summer tourist season, and at the same time these incredible opportunities or blessings. People walk in the door that we may never have met otherwise. We've met ex-political prisoners from Argentina who survived torture and live in Alberta and are involved in human rights, and they walked in and thought, wow, and hey, you speak Spanish too, and we become fast friends. Now, we wouldn't have met them if we didn't have the gallery, and people from all over the world. And
I wouldn't be here if you didn't have the gallery.
Maybe not.
Or the logger who walked in one day with his wife and stood in front of some of my 10 and 12-foot trees very quietly, elderly guy with gray hair and glasses, and then he turned to me and he was crying, and he said, he told me his story about feeling ashamed of what he does as a logger. And I said, why? And he said, well, because I don't, I have to clear cut these things. I'm really good at what I do, but I'm ashamed. I said, well, I'm really glad that you're a logger because we use all wood in this building, and thank you, and I'm glad that you're good at it. But maybe we don't like some of the things that are happening as a result of some of the practices. And he just said, you're right. And he bought a piece of artwork with trees in it. It's like, how many times am I going to find that in Victoria?
Right. Well, you might. I mean, I think it comes down to who you are as people. I mean, you always have the time to talk, and I know that it can be exhausting, because one of the things in the summertime especially is it's all output of energy. Somebody comes to the door, they want a tour of the theater, you want to be able to have a coffee, and part of art and part of what we do as advocates of art is that we spend time with people and we move their imaginations, and the creation of the art is actually this much of the time as opposed to this much of the time of getting support for the art and what we do, and building a building or preparing a canvas, all of those kind of things. We have to have time to do that. And so what you guys do is that you take the time to talk to the people that come into your gallery that actually change people's lives, and that you spend time. You have that espresso machine that has been we went over there before today and had a coffee.
It's our welcome mat.
It's your welcome mat, and it's pretty incredible. And I think that no matter where you guys go, that will be there.
We'll take the espresso machine.
I think that's true.
Yes.
I think that's.
And there are a lot of people we'll miss. We'll miss the landscape and the light and the snow even. And I think there's some just fabulous working class heroes here in Wells that are really part of the fabric and the history here.
Right.
And I think they're sometimes under-recognized in the art branding of Wells. There's even a myth that, well, Wells is a town of hippies and miners. Well, it might have been at one point, but that hasn't been the case, I don't think, for 30 years, maybe 25. I don't know how long. But you and Dave aren't hippies. We aren't. Marie Nagel wasn't. Dave and Cheryl's weren't. Unless you were hiding something from me. I think this more recent generation of builders and creators has not come from that demographic. And I would like to see that at some point understood and recognized and celebrated.
Yeah.
And we've had the support of people who aren't part of the, hippie miner, this sort of duality. I don't think that duality exists.
No, I don't think so. So I'm sensing that we're probably wrapping up in time. Is there anything that you want to share before we say goodbye to this little session of...
I'm just remembering 2 weeks ago when a friend who came in the gallery, he was waiting for us for breakfast, and some people came in early for coffee off the Barron Lakes, and we were serving them coffee, and he quietly came in and sat down and played the piano. And the people drinking coffee and looking around at the trees and the framed artwork were kind of hearing this music. And it just made me feel like we are so lucky. We have been so lucky here. Despite any obstacles, challenges, you know, some of the harshest parts, we've had something beautiful that will never be taken away. It will never be the same anywhere else, but we take that with us.
Yeah, that was Keith Bennett, who played here. He's a brilliant jazz and blues harmonica player, also plays piano and guitar and sings, and he did a concert here with the harpists, so mouth harp and harp. That was a magical moment, just beautiful. It's interesting to note, both of us have done artwork of the Sunset Theatre. Claire's image, I worked on that a little bit at the digital end of it for printing. I love that image, and people really respond to that because it catches the light, and you commissioned that image. But the very first silkscreen print I did when we moved here was a print of the Sunset Theatre.
Which is on our t-shirts that we sell in the lobby.
And it was one of the first shirts I printed with textile dyes. And I remember looking out the window when I was printing that shirt, and I realized, oh yeah, my grandfather, my mom's father, who I never met, worked in a gold mine in Manitoba. And I'd been looking out the window at the tailings, and I remember on a trip with my mom and dad in my early teens, before she passed away, we drove up to where she grew up, way north of Winnipeg, Manigatogan, and we passed some gold mine tailings, and I just remember that. And in some ways I felt, oh, I've come home. So that was part of the grounding of that imagery for me, behind the image.
Right.
So we're taking away with us you and this theater and our special moments in our own gallery and studio, and we'll be back. We'll be visiting now.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're part of the fabric of this theater for sure, and both of those images, I mean, your artwork, Bill and Claire, I mean, they are both iconic in my minds and have helped, hate to use the term, but brand the Sunset Theater as to what we are, and I believe that it holds a special spirit in both of those images. If people want to reach you, and if they want to come by and see the amazing space, and if they want to visit you online or get a hold of you, how would they do that?
Well, for the next year or whatever we're here, ring the doorbell when you get there, because we live there. We're there pretty well 24/7. And definitely open all day long in the summers by doorbell, but regular hours. In the future?
Well, for the time being, there is a site people can contact us through or get a picture of what we do. That's amazingSpaceStudio.com. At some point, I'm hopeful that whoever buys our building will take it to the next level. It may still be called Amazing Space, so at some point there'll be a transition, and hopefully we'll make some other enhancements.
And if you need great t-shirts, make sure to contact Bill Horn. And if you're looking for some amazing and inspiring work that you would like to commission or just have hanging in your living room, Bill Horn and Claire Kajenzek, awesome. I have a few of them, which I love and brings me a lot of joy and spirit every time I look at them. So thank you. So we are going to wrap up this episode of Where You Live at the Sunset Theater. It makes me emotional. It's a great space. It's a wonderful town. It reminds us, this reminds me why I'm here and what I'm doing and why I want to be here. And it's about the connection to people and who you are as people. And we forget about that. And to have this moment with you is really special, to have that time to reconnect as to what brought us all here in the first place. So thank you for agreeing to do this, and thank you for watching. And we are at the Sunset Theatre in Wells, BC, and you can reach us online at sunset-theatre.com. Thank you.